Good evening, everybody. We're so happy that all of you are here for our discussion on Florida constitutional amendments and City of Tallahassee charter amendments. For those of you who don't know us, we're the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee. We're a nonpartisan but political voting rights organization. Our mission is to educate and advocate, and when necessary, litigate on voting rights. So tonight we're here to educate. So what our goal tonight is to show you in a nonpartisan way all about these amendments, what a yes means, what a no means, who's supporting it, some groups that may oppose it, and we just want you to have all the information you need to make a good decision for yourself. Um, so we're gonna ask that everyone stay muted during the presentation. Now, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to those at the end of each segment, just to kind of keep the flow going. And then we'll do the constitutional amendments. We'll have question Q&A on that, and then we'll do the City of Tallahassee stuff. There's also going to be a very short survey I'll put in the chat at the end if you guys would be willing to do that. It really helps us know how we're doing here. I'll also be putting some important documents in the chat, links to our voter guide, things like that. So keep an eye out for that. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Sabrina.
Good evening, everyone. And let me just second Miriam's welcome and thank you for joining us tonight to talk about the amendments. And let's see, there's a couple of slides I know that duplicate some of the things that Miriam said. I want to mention, though, that the League of Women Voters is nonprofit, nonpartisan. That does mean that we do not endorse a candidate. We do not endorse a party. But as Miriam said, we are a political organization. We do take stances on specific issues. And so you'll see throughout here that we endorse some of these, and we do recommend voting for things and against things in a nonpartisan way. And if you are a male, please know that you are welcome to join the League of Women Voters. There are 3 ways to vote. You can do that by mail. You have until next Thursday to request a ballot to be mailed to you. You can vote early between October 21st next week and November 3rd. There are 10 sites around the county that you can drop those ballots off, or you can go, of course, on election day to your precinct and vote just like you normally would. If you got a mail ballot last year, please note that you must ask for a mail ballot this year. It does require you have until next Thursday to make that request. And of course, there have been a lot of new changes, so you really want to follow the instructions to the letter. It can be returned by mail, and it is a postage paid envelope. Please note it has to arrive at the Supervisor of Elections office by 7 p.m. on November 2nd, or on the day that voting happens. It can't just be postmarked by that day. And of course, you can always drop it off at the Supervisor of Elections office.
Sabrina, sorry to interrupt. Did you want to share your screen?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Here I am talking, going through slides, and I thought I had. My apologies. Let me go back. Thank you for that, Miriam, because I thought that I had done that. I'm having an issue here. How do I get to that? You tell me, Miriam, how I get back to that?
Actually, I think it is up. Maybe I just had clicked on your face. If anybody
Okay.
can't see the slides, just let us know in the chat.
Thank you. Yes, because I was under the impression that I wasn't just talking, that you guys actually could see the slide. So there are 10 locations, and hopefully you can see this map. All of the libraries, the county libraries, you can go to the FAMU Student Union, of course, the FSU Student Union. And if you have any questions about this, you can call the Supervisor of Elections office. They will know where all of these drop-off boxes are. What will be on your November 5th ballot? Of course, the U.S. president, 1 Senate seat, all of the House of Representatives, state senators and representatives up for election, 2 judges, Supreme Court judges, and merit retention. That's a simple yes or no. Should they be retained? Local, county, and municipal positions, the 6 constitutional amendments that we will discuss tonight, and then the 5 Tallahassee City Charter amendments that we will review. How amendments get to be before the citizens, it can be in 5 different ways. All of the amendments here tonight that we will discuss 2 of them came from a citizen initiative. The other 4 came from the legislature. In order for the amendments to pass, it does require 60% of the voters. First Amendment is the Florida legislature. It was introduced by the Florida legislature, and this is referencing partisan school board elections. What this does is it proposes to add to the state constitution that requires members of a district school board to be elected in a partisan election rather than a nonpartisan election. And this election would take place in November of 26, but candidates could run in a partisan way prior to that November 2026 election to be put on the bill. Just a little bit of information that currently being nonpartisan, all voters can vote in the primary and in the election for school board members. And actually, the school board members ran partisan in Florida until 1998. And that's when there was a constitutional amendment to make the voting the running of these positions nonpartisan. And in 1998, that passed with 64% of Florida voters. You likely know that Florida is a closed primary state. So what that means is anyone who is registered with no party affiliation would not be able to elect school board members if they were in the primary, if indeed they were running as a partisan entity. That would exclude about 30% of registered voters in Florida from voting on school board members in the primary if indeed it were a partisan election. The summary is it just changes the school board elections from nonpartisan to partisan. And as I said, that would be effective in November of 2026. A yes would say, let's make it partisan. And the proponents say, oh, school has already become pretty partisan. Opponents say, why should we have politics introduced into our schools? That should not be part of a candidate's platform. A vote no will maintain the status quo, allowing everyone to vote, and school board members would not run on a partisan platform. The Florida legislature, as I said, introduced this, and they are supporting it. The Florida League of Women Voters and Common Cause are opposing to the partisanship of school board members. Amendment 2 is the right to fish and hunt. In this amendment, it preserves forever fishing and hunting, including by the use of traditional methods, as a public right and preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. It specifically does not in any way abridge the authority of the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to basically exercise its duty. In this case, there's some questions about the language and the fact that traditional methods is not defined. And there is some concern that the use of traditional methods may actually conflict with some things that are currently prohibited, such as spear fishing and a type of net fishing that might be deemed traditional, but is now prohibited under Florida law. It does declare that hunting and fishing will be the preferred method to manage fish and wildlife. That's undefined as to how that would be implemented. And it again does not limit the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's powers. There are 23 states that have constitutional provisions to protect hunting and fishing. And just to make sure that you know, Florida statute does currently recognize that hunting and fishing should be preserved in Florida as a historic exercise. Of the 23 states that have constitutional provisions, only 11 specify that the protected hunting and fishing should be used to manage fish and wildlife. So it's only a small number, and the traditional methods, again, could conflict with some of the things that are currently outlawed. This would basically just enshrine in the Constitution the right to fish and hunt using traditional methods. Again, those methods have yet to be defined. And if you vote no, it maintains the status quo that recognizes the importance of fishing and hunting, but doesn't elevate it and single it out to be the way to control wildlife. Supporting this, as you would expect, Sport Fishing Association, National Deer Association, the Internal Order of Teddy Roosevelt, Opposing no to two, Speak Up for Wildlife, and Speak Up Wakiva. Amendment 3 is related to legalizing marijuana for adults 21 years and older, and says that adults 21 years or older will be able to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and marijuana accessories for non-medical personal consumption, smoking, ingestion, or otherwise. It does allow the medical marijuana treatment centers and other state licensed entities to acquire, cultivate, process, manufacture, sell, and distribute such products. And I point that out because it requires that you be state licensed. So it doesn't allow just anyone to grow marijuana. You do have to be licensed by the state in order to grow it and sell it. It allows adults 21 and older to possess, purchase, or use marijuana, for personal consumption. It maintains the violations of federal law, so there is still a conflict there. And it does establish limits at 3 ounces or up to 5 grams of concentrate. A vote yes just legalizes the options for adults 21 years and older to use up to those limits. A vote no maintains the status quo for marijuana regulated for medicinal use only. I know I've heard some of the allegations of I'm just going to smell marijuana everywhere. People will be smoking it everywhere. This does not supersede any laws that currently exist about where you can smoke and where you cannot. So it doesn't change the rules on where you can smoke based on what you're smoking or ingesting. True Leave, Smart and Safe Florida are supporters of this amendment. Drug Free America, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and Floridians Against Recreational Marijuana are in opposition. Amendment 4 is abortion access. No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. So to be clear, again, this does not speak to parental notification or parental consent. That is left to the legislature, and this does not abridge or try to infringe upon the legislature's authority in that area. It also, just to be clear, that healthcare provider is spelled out and defined in Florida statute. So unlike the hunting amendment, this actually is the items are defined previously in statute. This guarantees abortion access until fetal viability. Fetal viability is also outlined and defined in Florida statutes as the stage of fetal development when life is sustainable on the outside of the womb through standard medical procedures. And to be clear, in Florida in 2021 through June of 2022, there were 0 abortions performed in Florida in the 3rd trimester. So that the idea of late-term abortions happening at will, that is not something that has previously been happening in Florida based on current statistics. It does allow abortions when necessary to protect the patient's health. And again, it does maintain the legislature's authority to require parental or guardian notification. A vote yes establishes a constitutional right to access to abortion before fetal viability, and it keeps the government out of personal decisions of women's health care, and it maintains those decisions between a woman and her health care practitioner. A vote no would maintain the status quo of currently banning abortions in Florida after 6 weeks. Amendment 4 is supported by Floridians Protecting Freedom, the ACLU of Florida, Florida Rising, of course, the Florida League of Women Voters, Men for Choice, Planned Parenthood, Catholics for Choice. Opposing are Florida Voters Against Extremism, the National Center for Life and Liberty, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, and the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops. Amendment 5, also sponsored or introduced rather by the Florida legislature, is the annual Homestead inflation adjustment. This is an annual adjustment for inflation to the value of current or future homestead exemptions that apply solely to levies other than school district levies. and every person who has legal or equitable title to the real estate and maintains thereon or permanent residence of the owner or another person legally or naturally dependent upon the owner is eligible. So all of this to say that currently 25,000, depending on the value of your house, 25 to 50,000 of homestead exemption can be claimed, and you as a homeowner do not pay taxes on that portion of the assessed value of your house. In this case, what they would do is based on the consumer price index, each January, they will make an annual inflation adjustment. And so what this is going to do, it exempts the school taxes. So no school taxes would be affected. But what would be affected is property taxes set by county, school district, or excuse me, not school districts because they are exempt, cities and special districts. So what this is going to do is reduce the number of tax revenue available to those entities. And there's concern that there could be a reduce in programs and services as a result of those local tax withdrawals, if you will, from their coffers. This would take an effect in 2025 or 2025-26 fiscal year. If you vote yes, it establishes the annual inflation adjustment to the amount of assessed value and how much would no longer be subject to taxes. A vote no would leave the assessment as it is, and there would be no inflation adjustment every January. Amendment 5 is supported by the Florida legislature, who introduced it, and the Florida League of Cities opposes it. As you can see, the Florida League of Cities would receive the money, so that makes a whole lot of sense that they would be in opposition. Finally, Amendment 6 is the public campaign financing reform that would be also introduced by the Florida legislature. This proposes the repeal of the provision to provide in this that's already in the state constitution, which requires public financing for campaigns of candidates who agree to campaign spending limits. Florida enacted campaign finance law in 1986, and they added it to the Constitution in 1998 with 64% of the electorate. In 2010, this exact same amendment was introduced by the legislature, and it failed with a 52% vote. The purpose of public financing, campaign public financing, the original purpose was stated as making candidates more responsive to the voters and to insulate them to the greatest extent possible from special interests. Currently, candidates who receive public campaign financing must agree to several limits as to how much they cannot run unopposed and still get the money. They have to limit their spending. They have to raise specific amounts of revenue. They have to limit any personal loans or contributions that they make to their own campaign. They must report the financial data after the election, and they have to also have a post-election audit. This would repeal the constitutional provision, of course, for public campaign financing. A yes would repeal that provision and and for candidates, so they would no longer have access to state revenue. They would no longer have to comply with the rules to get access to those public funds. A vote no would maintain the provision of allowing people who might not have access to large amounts of money to run to have some public financing as long as they agree to those limits. The Florida legislature again introduced this amendment. The League of Women Voters is opposed to it. The League believes that it allows people who might not otherwise be able to run for office to at least have access to some funds to launch a campaign. And Common Cause is also opposes this this amendment. So before we move into the city charter proposals, I know that we would answer any questions or any way we can help before we talk about this.
So there were a few things in the chat. Someone was wondering about who proposed a certain amendment. I answered, but just to go over it, there's several ways to get on the ballot. Only two ways were used. One is the legislature. The other is citizens initiative. So that means petitioning. So the amendments 3 and 4 were citizen initiatives. Everything else was proposed by the legislature. And then we had a comment that gill nets would be a possible method on the traditional methods. Yeah, so so gill nets are dangerous to sea turtles, marine mammals, that kind of thing. So again, that does highlight how there's just some things we don't know about that amendment and the possibilities it could open. Um, since we are doing pretty well on time, if anyone has a question you just want to unmute and ask, that's okay. If you feel like it's kind of hard to explain in the chat, we can do that too. Or if you have a comment or something. Anybody?
Okay. Well, and if you are not a member of the city, then thank you for tuning in. You probably don't care to hear about the city charter proposals, so you won't be voting on them. But for those who are, excuse me, residents of the city, again, several ways that the proposals can get on the ballot. In this case, every one of the amendments, the proposed amendments, came from the city commission. First is the city commission. This is related to their income. And shall the charter of the city of Tallahassee be amended to provide that members of the city commission be paid an annual salary equal to the annual salary set by state law for members of the board of county commissions. The current charter provides for the salaries of city commissioners other than the mayor to be set at half of the Leon County commissioners. The formula for the mayor's salary currently is equal to the county commissioners. That would remain unchanged. So a yes vote will double the salaries of all city commissioners except for the mayor, and a no vote will keep the current salaries of city commissioners other than the mayor to be set at half of the Leon County commissioner salaries. Charter Amendment 2 is that to provide Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board has jurisdiction over members of the city commission when they are serving as board members of outside governmental agencies. The current charter provides that Independent Ethics Board jurisdiction, but doesn't explicitly say that this jurisdiction applies when they sit as members of external government bodies. And that could include things like Blueprint and Intergovernmental Agency and the Community Redevelopment Agency. This amendment clarifies that this jurisdiction would apply to commissioners in whatever role they serve as elected officials. Yes vote would clarify that this applies to whatever role they serve, including when they sit on external, and it potentially reduces the possible city costs with respect to any ethics complaints. And this is the current position of the Independent Ethics Board. A no vote will maintain the status quo, which is in dispute between the city attorney and the ethics board. Charter Amendment 3, if shall the city of Tallahassee be amended to provide that if only two candidates, neither of whom is a write-in candidate, qualify for the same seat on the city commission, the names of those candidates will appear on the general election ballot instead of the primary. And basically that just allows them to skip to the final general election and not have to go through the primary if there are only two names as a result of who's running. A vote yes will allow such races to be decided by the general larger November election and would leave less time between the election and the assumption of office of the candidate that successfully wins the race. And it would conform city commission races to how elections are handled for county commissioners. A no vote will keep the status quo if the incumbent city commissioner only has one opponent and that commissioner is defeated in the August primary. They would remain in office for at least 3 months, casting votes after they've been voted out of office until the new successor were to take office. Charter Amendment number 4, shall the charter be amended to require that City Commission convene a charter review committee and conduct a review of the charter every 10 years, beginning in June 2033. Although the charter reviews have been conducted in the past, this amendment, if passed, will be the first time that a regular schedule for charter reviews will be established. A vote yes will establish that regular schedule for reviews every 10 years. A no will keep the current practice of commissioners determining when it's time to conduct a charter review. Charter Amendment 5, shall the Charter of Tallahassee be amended to define the role of the Inspector General by charter rather than by ordinance? The intent of this amendment is to establish greater independence to the office of the Inspector General so that no city commission can abolish the office by ordinance. The amendment will also require a supermajority vote involving at least 4 of the 5 commissioners to dismiss any holder of that office. Such dismissal may be for cause, and the Inspector General must be given the opportunity to rebut this cause in a public forum. So a vote yes means the City Commission shall not abolish the office of Inspector General by ordinance. The amendment requires a vote of 4 or 5 in order to dismiss the Inspector General. A vote no would maintain the status quo, and the Inspector General would remain an at-will appointee. And of course, we'll take any questions that you may have on the state amendments or the Tallahassee Charter amendments.
I don't see anything in the chat, but we have plenty of time if anyone would just like to unmute and, talk. I put in the chat for everybody a recording of the presentation Ernie Payne gave last week that does a real deep dive into these charter amendments. He actually served on the Charter Review Committee, so he gives a lot of background on the process that was taken, how these amendments were added and shaped and reformed and all that stuff. And it's really interesting. So take a look at that if you want to know more about those city amendments. I also posted the league's voter guides to the constitutional amendments and the City of Tallahassee Charter. Oh, we say, what did the Charter Commission recommend for number 4? Oh, what's number 4? I feel like anything on there they are recommending.
Yes, I agree, because all of them were proposed by the city or by the commission. And so, yes, to review the periodic review, to do it every decade, was introduced by the city commission. So they therefore are indeed for it.
I think only the first one was not. Now that I'm remembering, but that would be a great that is answered in Ernie's presentation because it's just really in depth on how all of this got to be the way it is. Let's see. Don't see anything else. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions? Anyone unsure about anything? We can always go back. It's not a problem. This is your chance.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Appreciate your time. And if we can help in any way, and I know that Miriam has put some awesome resources in the chat, so I would encourage you to check those out. And there's a whole lot of information available both through the league and through the supervisor of elections. So if you have any questions, let us know.
I'm going to also put that. This is the supervisor of elections page about the amendments. I'm also going to put in our survey. Please take a look at that. It's really short. It's only 5 questions, and it really helps us know how we're doing with these. Someone says, okay, review the report. It seems most local governments review more frequently. Yeah, that's something that Ernie talks about, the different ways that these charter reviews can happen. So the 10-year limit wouldn't say they can only happen every 10 years. But he made the point that perhaps commissioners may say, well, it's going to happen. Let's just wait till the next review. So there's kind of some pluses and minuses. You just have to kind of think about it and decide what makes the most sense. Last call for questions. You can always email us too if you think of something later. Make sure you're listening to the candidate forums, WFSU and Tallahassee Democrat. I was listening to one today, and all I could think was these are some good questions that they really are really well thought out questions, come from our local government committee. So do check those out. They have replays, and you can find that info on WFSU's website. Anything else coming up, Sabrina?
No, I think that's it. And I too want to tune into those candidate forums. I'm very much looking forward to it. I know the candidate forums, we canceled the one, the Senator from Corey Simon and Daryl Parks. They today were at Tiger Bay. So I don't know if there's going to be any information about that, but the league did try to get that together and it did not happen. So there's no information available through the league in a candidate forum in that, but just so you know that Tiger Bay may have some information from today's luncheon.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you can take all this information, share with your friends and family. You are all now ambassadors of good voting information. So please spread it as much as you can.
Indeed. And thank you for doing this survey.
Yes, thank you all. It really helps us. All right. Well, good night.
Good night, everybody.
We can stay on for a minute. Let me go ahead and stop recording.